Hey, I'm Roland with Mobile Geeks, and what I have right here is the new Moto G on the right side and the Medion X4701 on the left. What I want to do is a quick comparison between the two devices because they're playing in the same price league. This one is 179 euros. I don't know if it's ever coming out in the US, but I'd guess it would be around 180 dollars over there too. And the Motorola G is starting at $169 or 169 euros, and it's just coming out. So they're both low-end devices price-wise, but hardware on the hardware side, they're pretty much in the same, I would say, mid-level. So what we get is a quad-core CPU in both devices. The differences are in the generational realm because the Medion device is actually based on an NVIDIA Tegra 3 platform. It's quad-core chip at 1.2 gigahertz, and the Moto G has a Qualcomm Snapdragon 400 MSM 8626Q, so that's also a quad-core chip running at 1.2 gigahertz, but it's newer, so the performance is a bit better on the Moto G, whereas the Medion Tegra 3 device is actually also pretty good, but not as fast, or not really. The Moto G is actually just above the Galaxy S3, for example, and the Medion should be just under under the performance of the S3. Let's take a quick look at the devices. We have a 4.5-inch 720p display with 329 ppi on the Moto G, and we have a 1280 by 720p 4.7-inch screen on the Medion device. The screen brightness is actually a bit better on the Moto G, which you can see right here. So you would probably have a hard time to read the display on the Medion earlier than on the Moto G. Also, the colors are a bit damp, and the Moto G does actually a pretty good job concerning the rendering of the fonts and everything else. It's also got a very nice white to it. So if you're a display guy, go with the Moto G. Otherwise, they're pretty much the same, or there's a lot of similarities. They both have 1 gigabyte of RAM and 8 gigs of onboard storage, but on the Medion device you get a micro SD card slot so you can extend the memory, which the Moto G doesn't have. So if you want more memory, you will have to spend at least $20 more to get the 16 gig version, but you can't upgrade that neither. What else is there in differences? We have a 5 megapixel camera on the Moto G with a flash, and the Medion actually has an 8 megapixel shooter on the back with LED flash again. As you can see, there is a matte cover on both devices, but the Medion is less prone to fingerprints than the Motorola device, which is actually drawing a lot of fingerprints despite its matte cover. You can switch out the battery on the Medion if you peel off the cover, and you get another free cover in the box with it. You can get the back of the Moto G off, but you can't change the battery. As I said, there's no micro SD in here, and there's only 1 SIM card slot. It's the same on the Medion, but on the Moto G there's going to be a version for China and Russia and a couple of other markets with a dual SIM configuration. On the front there's another difference. This right here is a 2 megapixel camera, while the Moto G only has a 1.3 megapixel camera. Concerning the weight, the Medion is actually 10 grams heavier than the Moto G. The Moto G comes in at 143 grams, while the Medion device is actually 155 grams. The thickness is pretty much the same on both devices. I think the Medion is just 1 millimeter thinner. The Moto G is, at its thickest point, is actually 11.6 millimeters, while the Medion is just under 11 millimeters, or just around 11 millimeters. So which one to get? If you want a smartphone that has all up-to-date hardware, you would want to get the Moto G because the Qualcomm chip in there is actually newer, and it is running Android 4.3 in here, and they're going to update that to Android 4.4 Jelly Bean in the near future, which is early next year, early 2014. So there you can see 4.3 on the Moto G and Android 4.1.1, which is actually a bit old by now on the Medion device. Software-wise, there's also a bunch of apps pre-installed on the Medion. You get a free outdoor navigation and a bunch of Aldi apps and a couple of other bloatware kind of apps because there's Mobile.de and other advertising apps on here, while the Moto G is actually totally blank. So you get a unmodified Android experience on the Moto G and earlier updates than on the Medion, that's for sure. So if you want a really up-to-date device, get the Moto G, and if you want to get a bit more included in the box, I would go with the Medion because you get a better camera. You should get a second cover in here, and you can extend the memory on the device. Performance-wise, the Moto G is ahead, while the Medion is also doing a good job, and the screen on the Medion is a bit less bright than on the Moto G. So I was rolling with Mobile Geeks, checking out the Medion X4701 versus the Moto G. Thank you.